or something. So they've thrown you out.
Wait, somebody asked me to take my child out of a store. It was me. I pay for a shadow for my child, right?
This is according to Michelle. Come on in and enjoy the show. Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of According to Michelle's. And today we're going to be talking with a lovely young lady who has an interesting journey with her child. As we know, we're in the month of April, and April is considered Autism Spectrum Awareness Month. And so I brought her on just to share with us her journey with her beautiful son. Now, according to statistics, they say that 62.2 million people globally can be diagnosed with autism, and this is as a result of 2015 data. And it's also said that it's mainly found more in males than females. So, with all of that in mind, we know that there's always so much that we can learn, and I thought that bringing on my friend, Dr. Taniesha Edwards, would be a good way for us to learn something, or, and bring more awareness to the condition. And so, without any further ado, let's put our hands together and welcome our guest today, Dr. Taniesha Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome, welcome.
For having me. It's a real pleasure to, share, and also, to catch up with you. It's close to my heart because my son, who has been diagnosed with autism, is my only child, and we want to make sure that the world is good for him. And so if we can help somebody else, I remember how I felt when I found out. I was looking for people who had experience, who I could use to sort of model my journey, or to get some sort of hope. And so that's why I don't shy away from sharing. So I'm really happy that you brought me on to do that.
Thank you so much for saying yes too. And so I want you to just quickly share something about yourself. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay, so I am Taniesha Edwards. I have a PhD in geology, and my primary job or occupation is in education. So I lecture geology at a top university in the Caribbean. I'm also a mom, that you probably picked that up already, and I'm also a serial entrepreneur. So I wear multiple hats, and I won't really jump into all of that. But transitioning from a career woman, or focusing on career, and then becoming a mom, it can be it can be a culture shock. It can be a real shocker, even if you're a normal mom. And so having to deal with autism as a diagnosis for your child makes it even more challenging. And so I'm not going to profess that I'm an expert autism mom, but I have gone through the ropes with an almost 8-year-old child now. And so I do have some insight that will lend to these situations.
Awesome. So you talked about your transitioning. I know, whenever you found out that you were pregnant, it must have been the best day of your life. What was that journey like for you and your husband, or the father of the child?
Well, we were very happy because, having delayed, pregnancy and childbirth to pursue careers, and then reaching to a place that, you might be more or less comfortable thinking, okay, this is a good time. Sometimes as career people, we think maybe 28 to 32 might be a good time to start a family, especially for the females who are looking at the biological clock. And so we were extremely excited. We couldn't imagine that, things would turn out the way they would. And, we are Christian people, so we accept whatever God throw at us, because we know that God allows things to happen for his glory. So at the moment of finding out, we were excited and, optimistic. and then also going into, pregnancy, childbirth. We had some challenges, but we always stood firm.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell me, what was there like an indication or some after this beautiful bouncing baby boy is born, what led you to even start to say,
Yeah, I
something?
know, and I know, Michelle's, you might not know the entire backstory, and I will share for your audience. So for me, and I kind of mentioned it a while ago, but it wasn't necessarily clear, but I will share with the audience. For me, for us, our pregnancy was sort of traumatic. My son was born preterm.
Mm-hmm.
He was born early because I had gestational diabetes and preeclampsia during that pregnancy, and it was my first pregnancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was in itself traumatic. I point this out. So my son is a miracle child for us, and he has continued to be a miracle. And against this backdrop, we found out the diagnosis. I share this because sometimes, especially when your child is newly diagnosed, you start to think, what did I do? There is guilt, there is confusion, there is worry, trying to pinpoint. And the fact is, the studies show that perfectly healthy pregnancies, the children that born from those can also be diagnosed, and then people who have challenges can have perfectly healthy children with no diagnosis. And so it really doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
how your pregnancy was, or if you were on drugs, or if you were sick, or if you were depressed, or any sort of variable. It doesn't contribute. Some people say the vaccination, a lot of misinformation and myths and incomplete stories are there that people use to say, okay, this is what causes the autism, or and none of it is true, or none of it is substantiated by empirical evidence. But I mention it because a lot of people are so guilt-ridden that they find blame. And for people who have to deal with this, they might find it in your family. Or maybe it's because you didn't exercise, or maybe you didn't eat right, or you were sick, or all these things, and none of it is true. So for us, my son, he was preterm, a lot of different issues. And so he was high risk, and they talked about different things that they were checking off to see if he was okay. And coincidentally, he passed everything with flying colors in his early months. Mm-hmm. And so he was discharged from high risk and from speculative care and all of these things that they were watching for. And so we thought everything was perfect. He looked good. He was very healthy and active and all of these things. So when we got to, I must also mention that he was the only child, the newest child, and the only child in our immediate circles. So he was that first grandchild, first nephew, first. So I didn't have a background or experience to compare him with. Mm-hmm. But I did notice, now that I look in hindsight, that he didn't babble. He wasn't meeting certain communication milestones, but I was unaware. And having gone through that traumatic pregnancy, my son was also born in the US because I had to get second opinions. And I don't want to go into all of the diagnoses
Yeah,
and all
you
of the
understand that. Mm-hmm.
that they made, but some of them were very, I don't want to use
Far-fetched.
They were not nice predictions. Okay. And as Christian people, we like to rebuke things and say none of that. And so we were very faithful and decided that we would get second opinions. And we were so happy that some of these things did not come to pass concerning him. All right. So we thought we were out of everything bad and everything was looking good. And he was doing so well, but we didn't pick up these little signs. So he was born in the US, and I had sent him to look for his grandma, and he was around 8 months. Or we had gone, but she brought him to the doctor and I didn't go with her. I think I had a meeting or something, and she called me on the phone and she said, the specialist says that he's perfect with everything else, but his communication milestone wasn't up to par. And, I was saying it to somebody else and I'm saying, oh, boys take longer than girls, so you don't have to worry. I was saying, no, I'm not listening to them. And I'm speaking in Jamaican parlance now, but we disregarded that altogether and said, oh, give him some time. Let us wait until maybe he's 2, and then we'll decide. So we didn't jump on that at that point. And we've heard stories that people say, oh, they're concerned and nothing came of it. So we were not at all bothered. When I used to send him to school from our daycare type school, Montessori, we sent him to. And I said I wasn't going to name call any place, but he wasn't talking or babbling or following commands or anything like that. And I did change the school. And I also sought medical attention. And here, where I'm located now, but I said, give it some time. And we did give it some time. And then we got, I sent him to another school. And that lady, she had experience because her son had autism. And she watched him for a term. And then she said, Mommy, I have to say something to you. And by that time, I was starting to think about it and starting to read up. And so I was willing to go and do the assessments. And who you do the assessment with is so important because in Jamaica, we don't have a lot of specialists that cater to these things. And so there was a long wait list, especially in the public system and also in the private system for the known people or the experts. And so I went to a less unknown lady and her outlook was so horrible. I felt so depressed and defeated and, and she wrote a referral to somebody else that I had made an appointment with already. But there was a long wait time. So, but she wrote this letter and I feel guilty for saying this now, but she made me feel so bad that I had this letter of referral to bring and I ended up, it was sealed. She wrote it in front of me and she sealed it. She didn't tell me what was in it. And I ended up opening that letter and tearing it to pieces and say, you know what, let him get a fresh diagnosis because it was so, the outlook was so terrible. And I hated, that was my worst experience. The next person that I went to was much better. You could see that she was a professional and she was very positive about the outcomes and the futures. And she gave us really good success stories and she tailored our efforts because, everybody have different resources. So she delved into what we could do and how we could help, and that helped us. So really finding the right people and not stopping if you meet a roadblock is really critical. So by the time I went to that second person and having read and all these things, I started to accept it. For me, I was the parent who was accepting. His father, my spouse, was not accepting at first. He was in denial. He's like, no, not my child, no. Foolishness. And so I had to take the reins of doing the therapies or following up with the therapies and finding the solutions. And lucky for us, we had resources that we could pursue locally and internationally in order to help him. And the other thing that I did was to search out for people who had gone through this experience, even just on Instagram, to get made friends on Instagram, just to get feedback and advice and stuff like that from people, not just locally, but abroad as well, to hear. Because there are, again, a lot of myths. People take their children off gluten and sugar and flour to say that it will heal them. And in desperation, you will want to try these things, but some of them can do more harm than good. Okay. And so it's really good to get the feedback.
So basically, word to the wise is get professional help. No old wise tale.
Absolutely. There's so much that I could say about that. I've even seen something where somebody said, it's a demon. You need to cast that demon out of this child. And
Was it? Did you find some of the statements offensive? Well, I guess you would have
Yes,
found
some
it
statements can
offensive.
be offensive,
Mm-hmm.
and this is part of the reason why we're having this and why there is an autism awareness month, so that people
Yeah.
can really be aware and be considerate of other people's needs and circumstances. And no two autistic person will have the same needs, or
Mm-hmm.
but if we're perceptive enough, we might be able to see the needs that they have. For instance, some children will cover their ears like this.
Mm-hmm.
And this is because they have sensitivity to noise.
Sensitivity. Mm-hmm.
It's literally hurting them. And some of them will scream while doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a public place, you might want to tell this child to stop. Or they might ask you to take this child out, even though you might be paying, let's say it's a doctor's office,
Mm-hmm.
and this child is sick and needs to see, the physician, and they're screaming because they're sick and because something in this place, it might be the overhead fan or some generator or some device, some background noise
Mm-hmm.
that they perceive as painful. And how I would try to break that down, sometimes you will hear, we probably think about a school setting where somebody screeches a chair, pulls it, and it squeaks. That can be a very painful sound for
Mm-hmm.
some people. And if things that are normal to us would sound like that to an autistic child, then they would obviously, if it's ongoing and it's not stopping, they would obviously be in discomfort. But because
Mm-hmm.
we don't feel that discomfort, we think, oh, they should just stop. And so, but awareness will help you to realize that just because you are not experiencing something that is uncomfortable, it doesn't mean that they are not. Some of them it's the light, some of them it's the floor, some of them can't wear shoes,
Oh, really?
or
I know they said sometimes the kids tend to move like rock in place or move their hands.
some of them can't wear certain fabric on their skins,
Mm.
certain sheets. My son would step on grass for a long, long time.
Wouldn't?
Would not.
Mm. Is it because of the feel under his feet, I guess?
Yes, the Christmas grass, the fine one, it's a little crunchy and it's a little.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't sit on it, stand on it at all, none at all. Many years. That was the weirdest thing. He would.
Wow. So
And
how
so when
old? Mm-hmm.
I started seeing from especially people who are adults, successful autistic people, they explain their experiences, and that is now when we have insight into, oh, this is why they do these things.
Mm.
You were gonna ask me, so how
Right,
old?
yeah. So how old was he when, like you said, you had to, that lead that you visited, you give that wrong, that harsh report, and then you went to another person. How old was he
He
around that
he,
time?
he was 3 plus. He was three
Mm.
plus at the time. So that's at that time, that was when he started getting what they call early intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And one school of thought says early intervention is key for great outcomes. But I recently found out, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that another school of thought, so the American school of thought, is that the early intervention gives really positive outcomes. They would get speech therapy, behavioral therapy, a bunch of different therapies that would help them to regulate and to learn how to adapt to society and
Mm-hmm.
be some semblance of normal. In
Mm-hmm.
the British system, they try not to inflict any sort of therapy on the children. They leave them for as long as possible to see if they would find a way themselves to navigate growth and to regulate and to try to fit in some way.
Mm. So
Um,
have you ever seen someone who on both sides how that worked for them with that?
um, I think with the correct nurture, both of them can work.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say this is because a lot of people now, as adults, are just realizing that they might be autistic.
Mm.
Somehow they're successful, because 25 or 30 years ago, most doctors or pediatricians weren't looking for that as something to diagnose. It was
Right.
unheard of.
Yeah,
It
I'm
doesn't
not
mean
really. Yeah, it's just more recently. No, I've been hearing about. That's true. You're so
right.
correct.
So it's not that it didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that they didn't have a name for it,
Right.
or they didn't have this name for it. And then it is
And them just say him slow.
something. This
Sure
child is
enough.
weird, or whatnot.
They,
Him
they,
bright, but
they
him
have that
weird.
this
Him
thing they
bright,
call
but him not talk.
the slow check. The
That
child
sort of.
is slow. They get a dependent. They get a
Mhm.
check from the government, so they call it the slow check.
Ah, so
Help
many
us,
things.
Lord.
So for those that they nurture, they have good outcomes. They just say, "Oh, this child is weird," or they don't like that thing, and they move on. Or they said, let us put them in artistic things, or and teachers, especially in Jamaica, they played a role in that. They say they group us according to our abilities in high school, especially.
Mm-hmm.
You go and do woodwork, or you go and do this, or you go and do the maths because you're really good at it. And so they help us to navigate whether it works or not, but it has worked for some people. So leaving it to work for some people, and early intervention work for other people.
Wow. There's so much that you still, I guess, so much to learn. I guess that's why they call it a spectrum. And
It's
there's
a
just
spectrum.
so
Yes.
much angles to it, so much tentacles. Wow.
And everybody who has to deal with it, they have to model or curate or create their own approach. You have to be willing to stop something if it's not working, critique something, even though a professional might recommend it to you. It might not be what is good for your child or your ward. And so you have to use your God-given discernment and intuition and observations to see if this thing is working or not. And if it's not working, then you have to go back to the drawing board.
In light of everything you've been talking about, what's the environment you create around you? So you talk about, discovering different therapies and different interventions and so on. What's life now like for your son?
Okay, so that's a really good question, to be honest, because I haven't thought about it in that way. But what I essentially try to do is to give him the most comfortable, the most interactive, normal life that I can give him, while still including his needs, and his therapists are the ones that I can accommodate or I agree with. So my son really likes swimming. For him, it's like therapy. So I make sure to include that in his weekly routine. And now I'm looking to increase the frequency at which he goes to swim lessons. He really loves that. In fact, I can use it as a bargaining chip.
Oh.
So I incorporate that. He does speech therapy. I don't think he needs it anymore, but I keep doing it because he enjoys that speech therapy that he does. And the one that he does, it's a play type of therapy. So there's a lot of gaming and devices and toys. And so he really looks forward to that. So I love some more of that. At the moment, I don't do behavioral therapy with him. I'm not in agreement with some of the methods. And so this is just one example to show that you don't necessarily have to go with everything that your child started out with. And that's what was. Otherwise, I also put my son in a normal school with normal children. We have tried other situations and I did not like it. I want him to be integrated with other children. And so I have made an effort to put him in situations that he is interacting with and can model, because children are very sponge-like. They absorb so much and they model their peers. And so I think it would be a great disservice to put him in confinement with other children who have other issues
Right.
which he would then model. So I have made a point of putting him into a soft environment, not very competitive, an environment where he interacts with other children and he can learn from them and
Mm-hmm.
also get the requisite education for his age.
Okay, so how's that going? Is he
He's doing,
adjusting? Okay.
he has adjusted very well. The first week was very interesting
Mm.
because he's a very willful, strong person. So he
Mm.
pushes, fights, grabs, and then the second week he was more mellow. He was going to the ropes, staying in queue, taking the commands, following the routines. And so we put limitations on our children, whether they have diagnosis or no diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
I say, oh no, they can't do that. Maybe they can't. It's that. But sometimes if we just allow them and have the faith, we will see. So that's worked
Mm-hmm.
really good for
Yeah,
us
I think
as well as
children are very resilient, which
oh
I mean,
yeah,
as
absolutely.
adults we grow to that, but even as a child, I've noticed, as children, I've been noticing, you pay attention, especially now, but I guess because I'm now working with the smaller kids, the resilience, it's
It's
amazing.
it's it's amazing to see, to
Mm-hmm.
watch, because we think, they're just children.
Mm-mm.
They're perceptive and they're
Mm-hmm.
learning.
Mm-hmm. It's the same brain in their heads too. So
Yes,
yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
awesome. So he's navigating the school world, going to his swimming. That is so awesome. But what about you? What do you I mean when I say you and the father, what do you do together to sort of breathe perhaps for your self-care, for your not saying you want to get a break from your kid, but a lot of this, I just said some of the things you're not in agreement with, a lot of this thing coming at you, everybody's saying it's X, it's Y, it can be overwhelming. What do you do to just sort of breathe, sort of get your moment to the rest?
Well, faith, having a relationship with God is really good for things like these. So
Mm-hmm.
that helps us a lot. And then just the general, self-care that everybody practices. You want to make sure to keep on top of that. And it's interesting that you brought that up because autistic moms especially, they often complain that they don't get any time, they don't have any help, and they spiral into depression and a lot of mental issues because of the overwork or the worry and anxiety that is often associated. And so that self-care is critical. The getting help where you can, whether it is somebody to come in that you pay or a family member who is helping you or a household that is helping you,
Mm-hmm.
grandparents or aunties and stuff like that. It does really make a big difference when you can have a village or a team to help with these things.
Yeah.
So that's how we lean on our support
Mm-hmm.
systems and we prioritize, you know, break time for our jobs and our businesses, and then also the self-care time. So taking a little vacation or going to the countryside to just hang
Mm-hmm.
with family and taking breaks from social media and some things as
Right.
well, because sometimes certain hobbies or business ventures might conflict. And at some point, you have to make a choice if you want to keep your priorities as priority. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes
Be
you
the
might
main
have to
thing,
make
the
that
main thing.
sacrifice. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, you were talking about initially when he started, he was the only one in the circle. Did he get any cousins yet?
He has no, he's got cousins, no. On
Okay.
my side, they're younger. Um, they're much younger, but it's really good, and it's also good that they're not experiencing these things. And so at first, when he just got cousins, he was very protective and he wasn't sharing his mom and all these things, but he has warmed up, which is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm. So the cousins coming into the picture. Because he got all the love before, so now he got
Absolutely.
all.
So he's
These
gonna give some
extra
love
people.
now. And he's getting there. Before he was no. He's getting there.
Awesome. So what are some maybe pointers you've been dropping them all through you would want to share with somebody who is at the early stage? They're just learning that hey, your kid is, ASD or
I would say it's not the end of the world. It's becoming more and more common, and so just be motivated. You still have a child, a gift from God, and this child can be anything that they want to be. There's no limitation. It doesn't have to be a burden or anything like that. There are opportunities and possibilities and ways to navigate this even without resources, because I think that is a lot of fear that people have. Oh, but me not have the resources for this, or but God will make a way, and you have to find that way as a parent with a diagnosis of your loved one or a child. So you have to do the research that will help. Have to find good success stories that will motivate you. Those help. And you still want to be in the know, so you want to know what the worst case scenario is, so that you can condition your mind and know that, hey, my situation is not too bad. Because even though I'm not a big fan of comparing, it does help to know where you stand. It does help to be aware, to identify, where you are and what you can do to improve that. And so just having that positive outlook and finding help, because sometimes if you internalize everything and not seek out help, then you might feel isolated or burdened. But if you get help or you navigate and you make friends with other autistic parents, you see that everybody's going through the same thing, and there's strength in numbers and support. So that will help. And then also enjoy your child as much as possible, just because there's so much to enjoy the milestones, enjoy the accomplishments. Your child might be faster. People don't look at that, at some things. People don't talk about that part. They might be slower at some things. And so still enjoy the milestone. Slower at something does not mean that they're never going to get it.
Right.
And that helped me early on, because I saw where people who are diagnosed with autism were nonverbal 15, 16 years of their lives. And then all of a sudden found out that they can communicate. All of a sudden decided to talk at 16. So it doesn't matter if it happens early or late. So some of those success stories helped me. Child that was nonverbal up to age 6, and then started at age 7, they started being proficient for the age 3. And at 8, they were proficient at age 9. And by the time, their growth is that even though they had a slow start, their intellect was exponential. By the time they were 15, they had the intellect and the knowledge, having passing tests that a 19-year-old or a 22-year-old would take. But the only way these things happen is because somehow their parents didn't give up on them. They kept letting these children lead them. Because if your child is not responding at all, and I had to learn that too. My child wouldn't hold a pencil up until age 5 plus. If I would put a pencil in his hand like this, big jumbo pencil or whatever it is, he would not hold it. He opens his hand like this, so it would fall. I would try to, bend his hand to hold the pencil. Let's do the coloring books. I bought coloring books non-stop. The coloring books are there, still empty, because he didn't like coloring. He would not hold a crayon at all. And I had to let him not hold it. I had to allow him. I couldn't force him or beat him or any of those things that might have worked for some people because he just wasn't ready. And I had to accept that until that time. I didn't give up. But the next year, he was willing to hold it when we were bargaining for different
Bargain
things.
swimming class again.
Bargain swimming class, bargain going to the games, the park, bargain going on the swing, bargain food, whatever, bargain tablets and YouTube videos. And he learned bargaining and he's like, okay, I will hold it. He was happy about it. Yeah. And now he's writing and all these things. He's performing at his age level for most things.
Awesome. That's just your tenacity to just work with the program. And as you said it prior to the start that you weren't rigid in the plan. You remember that part? You were talking about your plan. You had to make them flexible. Yeah.
So you have to be accommodating as much as possible, because if you get fed up or you push too hard, then you have you get a disconnect. And the other recommendation I would make, because I've not seen this anywhere, and this is something that I've had to come to terms with, autistic children, or not just autistic children, but children with some other disorders can regress, meaning they used to do something well and then they stop doing it all of a sudden. Child might have been writing properly or talking and then stop talking. It can happen, and you shouldn't be frustrated by it, because the fact that they were able to do it before means that they can do it again. And so just give them the support and be persistent and don't be taken aback, which is why it is really good to capture everything. My son used to eat a lot of food and then he just stopped. And I had photos of him eating food and doing all these things, and you would never know.
So no, he's not eating as much, or not? He just changed his style?
Yes, some autistic children have very picky diets. Some of them only eat a particular texture of food. Some of them only consume liquids or pureed things. Some a particular color. And some malnutrition is one of the things that pediatricians look out for. Luckily, we didn't have to deal with any of that. He's an eater, but
what does he do?
Diet changed.
Liquids or
no? He eats normal. He eats normal food.
Oh, okay. Can you say he had stopped eating as much?
Yes, he had stopped eating. What was it at the time? He was just eating after I sent him to school and I sent snacks with him. I had called up one of my parent friends who had normal children. I said, what do you send to school? And she's like, oh, these snacks, all these snacks. And I bought all these snacks. After he was introduced to all these snacks, he didn't eat anything cooked again.
He just has all the snacks.
Just snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Carbs. And he only drank water or apple juice. Almost is still just water and apple juice now. His grandma was very persistent, which is where the village comes in. So she would make some very healthy, nutritious soup, and she would also sit and feed him the soup, bargaining, and that is how we maintained his nutrition. We leaned on the Pediasure as well to try to improve the nutrition while we were going through that. But I had pictures of him eating plantain and egg and sausages, and he wouldn't touch these things. But over time, he's made progress. So now he's having eggs and sausage and vegetable and some fruits. He wouldn't eat grapes and strawberries. None of these exotic foods he would eat. And you think your mom, you should buy these things and put them in your house and feed your child these things, and your child is not eating it, and there's not much you can do about it, because it's not that they don't want to eat. Like typical children, it's like, want, they're not hungry, they're just picky. It's something that they might throw up if you force them to eat it, or they just don't want it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And some of them don't eat if they don't get what they want. Some of them only eat nuggets or fries or cheese tricks.
So just it's a lot. It's not just only the behavior, but also the diet. Then
that is a big thing that people don't realize, because the thing is, when you're on the outside looking in, you only see behavioral problems. If somebody's walking into church with a child, or in the mall or the supermarket, you only see that this child is not listening, and they think
or
that is
they
what
don't
they
speak
find.
clearly,
Or they don't speak clearly, or their mannerism is off, or communication is off. You think this is what people see, and that's what they use to define it, but it is so much more than that. And oftentimes these manifestations or expressions have to do with some underlying need or stimulation that they're either getting too much of or not enough of.
So that's how the therapy comes in, where you assess
so they
what is
explore
it, the needs are.
They explore what the needs are, and they also try to regulate them so that they can be acceptable or normal, can communicate their needs. Because that's the other thing. Some of them are aggressive because they can't get, especially the nonverbal ones, because they can't get your attention. They can't say, "Mommy, I'm hungry," or "Mommy, this is hurting." And so, or "Daddy, this is hurting." And so they might punch you to get your attention. And the bigger they get, if they're doing that, then it can be problematic.
Yeah. So looking at your son now, you said he was around 8. What if you could maybe like dream a little or think about it, like 5 years down the road, what do you see his life looking like, or what you'd want to see in terms of acceptance of, children with autism and stuff like that?
That's interesting. How you put that? Because in the world that we live in now, and the world that he's in, there is acceptance. If you don't hide things and you explain, so even at the school that he goes to a public school. And the teachers there, they're very good. We're in Jamaica, and they explain to the other children, Tiwan, he has these things and he behaves this particular way, and they also told the parents, and so everybody is aware and welcoming, and so he's got a really good experience there. So I would want that sort of thing to continue outside. No, I have my mom actually works at that school, and I'm very good friends with the principal, so that might have played a role. But so I would want to see something like that in the wider society. But at the same time, I also don't agree that people should have a branding on them that says "I'm autistic, be nice to me."
Right. And that's for me too. I don't like that. Like they're not saying you want to be ignorant, but I don't like you use the labels and then you mark them off and you leave I don't like that either.
No. So
they're children at the same time.
Just so people can either be nice or mind your business. Just be nice, because you never know what that parent is going through or that family is going through if you see a child acting up or a teen acting up, because autistic children become autistic teens, become autistic adults. So either be nice or objective. I don't know what's really going on in that direction. Let me not interfere. Or encourage if I can, if somebody is in distress and you can help, ask what they need. So for example, a child or a teen or an adult goes into a place and they ask for maybe a concession or excuse to do something. They might want to cut a line, and they will try to explain. Be open-minded to say that this person can't stay in this environment because if they go privately to somebody, or something else is happening and you can help, you can assist, I've received that in the past, and people have asked me, why didn't you just say something? Or or somebody call me out and say, do you want this? No, I'm fine, because I feel like it's okay to wait, or that sort of thing. So those things really help in certain situations, and we want to see more of that. And if you can't help and something is happening, don't be judgmental. Mind your business, because you don't know what is the underlying. No, it makes it worse if somebody says you can't control your child or that sort of thing.
That's what you're saying.
A child might not be able to walk in the supermarket, but they might be able to sit in the cart. And suppose this child is not a child that can take their shoes off, and the security might come and say, these shoes cannot be in the cart. You understand? And of course, the place might have their rules. So we're not saying that but maybe you could say, if you go to somebody and say, the child can't be in the cart, or because they wear shoes and whatever it is, you could offer a solution. Can we put a bag over the shoes to make it, more sanitary? Or can we isolate this cart and get it clean? That sort of thing. It's contributing.
So
I'm just not throwing out, because I've been thrown out. I was
just gonna ask if you ever had something. Oh, because based on the line, I'm like, it's sort of if you've come across something, so they've thrown you out.
Wait, somebody asked me to take my child out of a store. It was me. I pay for a shadow for my child, right? This is somebody who comes with my child to certain things at school, and sometimes, because we don't have one right now. And at the time, it was me and the shadow and my son. And he took something and he was shaking it. And the security came and said, can you take him outside? And I said, why would I take him outside? We're here to purchase something. I'm going to purchase what I came here for. So he said, so what if he breaks these things? And I said, then I'll purchase them. But, and then somebody from that store that I knew, she was really mad about it, because she was aware of the situation and she got them to apologize, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Right.
They could have.
And then what if you didn't know the manager or whoever the person was?
Yeah.
Got the staff member to apologize. I guess so in this world you want to see even more acceptance as it is. I just say, mind your business.
But I mean, if you must do your job, we're not saying that people can't do their jobs, because it's their job to keep the place in order and stuff. Ask if there's something that will solve this problem, and not just throw out your customers or chase out people, because you put them in more danger. You put them in more danger.
And then you lose in business, because they may just never come back.
Yeah. So I would like to see a more accepting world where people make it their point, even though you might not have an autistic child, you might know somebody who loves somebody who is autistic. So your family might not be touched by it at the moment, but be aware so that you know how to advise or serve or help or accommodate. Because again, if you go to an event and there is no provision for a gluten-free child or a child that only eats a particular thing, then you've excluded them. So these are the things to find out that this is what. And that's just
a little bit on decency. So this has been an interesting conversation, Taniesha. I really wish you and all of you in your village even more moments of joy and life with your son. And even as you took some time today, I really appreciate you sharing. I learned even more that I mean, there's so much that you still can learn, but just hearing from your perspective, I learned a lot. And so thank you so much. I wish for you all the best.
Thank
and
you.
your son, grows up to be an even more remarkable individual. And I'm sure he brings you joy daily.
Absolutely. He's so gifted. So he's so gifted. At one point, he told me he wanted to be an astronaut. I'm like, where did that come from?
Okay, anything is possible.
So I'm just leaving the ball in his court to what he wants to
Right.
be, and I will try to give him as much
Mm-hmm.
resource as possible.
Awesome. And all the best as he goes higher in high school, and since he wants to be an astronaut, so that's all like college and all those things. So yeah.
The youngest professor at, I can't remember if it's Oxford or Cambridge. The current youngest professor there was
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed with autism.
Oh really? Mm.
Somebody sent that to me
As
recently.
an adult or
Yes, he's an
grown?
adult. No,
No.
he had autism. He was diagnosed early, but the
Mm-hmm.
youngest professor at
Mm.
British top university,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
autistic. So the sky is the limit for them. We just have to nurture
Yes,
them. Because what happens,
definitely.
especially in our culture, back in the day, they would lock a lot of children in the back room.
Really?
Of course. Think about it.
In the back room?
In the back room. Think about it. I want you to think about it because this is a discussion that I've had. And it's not just our culture. Anytime you have a child that is not doing the norm,
Mm-hmm.
they say that child is, they label them, that child is retarded or slow or
Slow.
whatever it is.
Right, me know them that
And them say, you go work at Grung or the farm, or
you go home, eh?
if they're not physical, if they're not, especially if they're not physically capable, because that's another thing. Some autistic people have physical challenges. So if they're not physical, they just leave them in a back room and they didn't check out if they can get therapy or there was no such thing as therapy. Some people
Mm,
are deaf. They didn't go and do the hearing test to see if it's something that they can modify or get a hearing
mm-hmm.
aid and stuff like that. So they didn't get the help. Some people didn't get sent to sign language to do that. They were just abandoned, really. They got food and shelter and clothing, and that was it. No
So where there was
nurturing.
like a lack of understanding, there was
Mm-hmm. And it
neglect.
is still happening. It is still happening where people just say, okay, this one is not going to navigate that. And
Mm,
they don't provide the avenues or the nurture or the facility and the resources for them to grow at their own pace because they're not doing grade one work or they're not
mm,
doing kindergarten work. They just figure that it is finished, which is why I brought up the fact that a child might be not performing for their age up to 6, 7, 8, and then all of a
mm-hmm.
sudden they start doing kindergarten work at that, and then they would surpass.
Right.
But they would have to have that continuous nurture and resource come back at them at that time when they're now ready.
Mm. Just
So
it's a matter of just keep learning, adjusting, and being what you call it, not a little bit more accepted. Because if you look different, people always from overseas always look, talk down to you or look at you weird or stuff like that. And it shows that the fact we're all different in somewhere from.
absolutely.
We're all
And
different in
unless
somewhere from.
we are facilitated, we can, or a light won't get to shine, or you find a way to navigate it. Because, and that's what a lot of adults have had to do, navigate, because a lot of people are actually walking around with a bunch of different diagnoses that they were
We're
undiagnosed conditions, walking around with undiagnosed conditions that they found a way to navigate and it
mm-hmm.
manifests in not meeting deadlines, just different behavioral patterns that if you talk to a specialist and just tell them about you, they would diagnose you right away, but you would know because you just don't know.
Right. And you,
And
and you
those
learn to
are the
mask
people.
it, or you learn to
And those are the people who can give insight and help the newer generation who have diagnosis, especially when they come back and explain that, oh, I have that. But I wasn't diagnosed and I went through the school and I went to university and I did that and that and that and that. Yeah.
Well, this is good. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we all have a little bit of introspection and persons talk about being inclusive and exclusive, but when we look at the end of the day, whether the child is whatever label they have on it, I think you just treat them as a child. They are children. And so when you hear stories of people being mean, even to adults, I can't really stomach, the unkindness and the meanness that people show to each other. But let us embrace a little bit more love. Let's hug on our children, and regardless of whatever it is, whether they're so-called the what you call normal or abnormal, let's love on them. Let's meet them where they are and just grow them up in the best way possibly.
Absolutely.
And
That's the
wherever
key.
you need help, get the resources. A lot of things can be Googled, and we'll just take it one day at a time. And as Tanisha was talking about, building her village, I pray that your village is as strong as you need it. For those
Thank
who are
you.
watching, and Tanisha, thank you so much for sharing your story, and God bless you. And I'm, looking forward to hearing all the good stories about our little friend, who is the subject of our discussion. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, where you will see me talking about other person's stories, highlighting life's moments, celebrating a little bit with them, and sharing in their journey. All right. Thank you so much for making it according to Michelle's. Mwah. Take care and God bless.
You're very welcome.